Thank you very much. Now, if the audience members are interested in introducing yourselves, please type your name and affiliation into the chat box. It's not necessary, but if you'd like to, you can. We'll give you a minute or two.
Hi, this is Virginia O'Connell. I didn't unmute quick enough. I'm here for the water bank.
Welcome, Virginia. Any others? Okay, let's go ahead and proceed. Let's start with agenda item 2, webinar logistics. McKenna Welsh, I guess, will handle this. McKenna?
Thank you, Vice Chair and members of the Council. Good afternoon. Before we get started, I will go over some webinar logistics. Members of the public, we ask that you please keep your phone muted during the meeting. This helps reduce audio feedback. If during the meeting you have a question, please feel free to type your question in the chat box, and they will be read and addressed at the end of each agenda item. If you would like to speak to the Council, the call to the public will be the time to do so. Please indicate in the chat that you would like to speak, and we will unmute your phone. This meeting is being recorded and will be posted to ADWR's website and YouTube page next week. Finally, if you're having any technical difficulties, please contact our help desk. Their contact information can be found on the screen. Thank you for your time. That is all I have.
Any questions by the committee on any of that? Hearing none, let's move to item agenda 3. Amla Water Loss Control Training and Technical Assistance Program. Patrick will present the results of the WMAP-funded Amla Water Loss Control Training Program. Patrick?
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the Council. My name is Patrick Adams. I'm the Water Policy Advisor for the Arizona Municipal Water Users Association. I'm happy to be here today and have an opportunity to present this program with you. McKenna, is there an option for me to share my slides, or is it best to go through and with you to run these?
Yeah, I can give you presenter privileges right now. 1 second.
Thank you. Does that look okay, everybody?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. This morning, I'll be providing you with an overview of the program, the activities that were conducted, the program outcomes, and as well as some concluding actions and next steps associated with the Water Loss Control Training and Technical Assistance Program. On this slide, we have a brief timeline of milestones leading up to the program. In 2018, there were a number of efforts to survey the AMWA members and gauge their interest in a training and technical assistance program intended to help reduce non-revenue water within AMWA member distribution systems. There was a substantial amount of interest in such an initiative, especially coming off of ADWR's other statewide water loss training programs that were happening around that time. In late 2018, a proposal for the water loss program was presented to the Phoenix AMA GUAC, and this council ultimately recommended that ADWR fund the water loss program at $300,000 via Water Management Assistance Program funds. AMWA staff began an RFP process and formed a selection committee in 2019. And eventually, the Southwest Environmental Finance Center was retained as a technical expert to provide the training and technical assistance. The program agreements for funding were finalized and agreed to by all of the relevant entities in January of 2020. So I just wanted to provide this slide and a little bit of background and history for you. The timeline looks fairly simple here, but it was really a huge process to get this program going and scoped and put together, and a lot of individuals put hours of hard work into it. First and foremost, ADWR Deputy Assistant Director Carol Ward really conceived of this program and was the driving force behind its inception during her tenure previously at AMWA. And it couldn't have been done without all of her hard work and vision. And that also goes for a number of current and former staff at the Department of Water Resources and AMWA as well. So I just wanted to make sure we had an opportunity to give thanks to those that really got this program up and rolling. And I also wanted to note that we have with us today staff from the Southwest Environmental Finance Center, Director Heather Himmelberger and Research Engineer Don Knoll. And as you'll see today from this presentation, they did a tremendous amount of work over the past 18 months executing this program and delivering that training and technical assistance to the participating utilities. And they'll be available at the end of this presentation to help answer any questions that the GUAC may have. So moving along, the AMWA Water Loss Control Program had a number of goals and objectives, and I've included several of them here. First, to assist the AMWA members in developing or strengthening their internal water loss control teams. Next, for each participant to complete water audits using national industry best practices and to have those audits validated by a third party. In this case, that third party is our technical expert, the Southwest Environmental Finance Center. Third goal, to implement more advanced tracking and estimations of utility non-revenue water. And our final general goal here is to identify opportunities to take action based on the results of our water auditing efforts to minimize loss where appropriate. So this graphic shows, this is a representation of the program structure that we created to achieve these goals. And we developed 3 stages that consisted of training and technical assistance from the Southwest EFC over the course of the program's 18 months. And you can see that this diagram is a cycle where the AMWA members would go through the different exercises and stages in evaluating their water systems and ultimately taking action to reduce water loss. And the reason for this cyclical approach is that we didn't just want this program to be a one-time thing where an outside consultant comes in and writes a report that gets put on a shelf somewhere. The point of this water loss control program was to give the participating utilities the tools to implement these best practices year after year after year, so they could constantly be improving their water loss control programs. I should also mention that when the program was conceived and scoped, it was initially anticipated that 7 of the 10 AMWA members would participate in this program. Over the last 18 months, we've actually had participation from 9 of the 10 AMWA members. So I just wanted to make sure to note that, and that's a success, and wanted to give you a sense for how many utilities were participating in this program. So over the last year and a half, the Southwest EFC has put on 16 different trainings for the AMWA members on a variety of topics related to water loss control. On this slide, we have a sample of some of those topics, including the American Water Works Association audit methodology, training on developing water loss teams and goals, controlling apparent and real losses, the economics of water loss, a series of case studies, and a lot of other content. We actually did have a full day workshop in February of 2020 in person at the AMWA offices. It was really widely attended. I think we had over 50 participants, and it was a great event. And that was really just, I think, a week or 2 before we transitioned to the virtual environment due to the onset of the pandemic. So we had envisioned this program to be an in-person program, but we were able to transition swiftly into the virtual environment, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So in addition to training, each AMWA member had access to the expertise of the Southwest Environmental Finance Center and was able to receive one-on-one assistance when desired. So this table breaks down some of that technical assistance that took place over the duration of the program. So as we mentioned, 16 total trainings over the last year and a half. Over 2,000 hours of technical assistance, including emails, calls, outreach, as well as over 100 meetings with utility teams to provide one-on-one instruction. And that's a statistic that I really like to review and point out that is a lot of touch time and one-on-one technical assistance from our expert on this subject that the utilities were able to take advantage of. A significant amount of data analysis and report preparation happened as well. Each AMWA participant received numerous reports and recommendations from the Southwest EFC on ways to continue furthering their water loss control efforts and auditing. And at the bottom of the table, you can see that over 50 different resources, from guidebooks to videos to other tools and references related to water loss control, have been made available by the Southwest Environmental Finance Center. So this is just one way of kind of looking at some of the numbers of how busy we've been over the last year and a half, and some of the technical assistance and training that was provided as part of the program. So having covered some of the activities that this program sponsored, next we want to review some of the outcomes that resulted from this effort. So to start, we'll share a selection of positive outcomes that were common to all of the participating AMWA members. So first, we had strong engagement throughout the program. We had utilities that were engaging staffs and many of their departments having regular meetings and really making a push to improve their water loss control efforts in their water system. Every participant completed a water audit that was validated by a third party, and every participant increased their understanding of the non-revenue water in their utility and the best practices for management of those losses. Participants were able to cross-validate the regulatory reporting that they submit each year to ADWR on lost and unaccounted for water, using this methodology and these techniques to really look at those numbers in a different way. And finally, another positive outcome that we saw for all participants were that the average real losses for the AMWA systems were at the national benchmark median, and a number of our members were far below. And that's a really good thing, and it demonstrates that large Arizona utilities are coming in with positive metrics on water loss compared to other utilities around the nation. So we have a good foundation to work from. I also want to highlight a handful of individual success stories. Now, there are too many to include in this presentation, and every participant had their own individual successes, but I did try to capture a few here, including we had a number of folks identify data handling errors and even some double counting of water that was actually making water loss numbers look higher than they actually were. And that's exactly the sort of thing we're looking to find when we do this water auditing methodology and really take a deep dive into accounting for the water and where it flows on an annual basis. We've seen a number of AMWA members improve their procedures for data collection and storage, which is very important for current and future water audits. Multiple cities, as a result of this program, are updating their meter testing and calibration programs as an opportunity to really refine the accuracy estimates for their metering throughout their systems. And finally, as a result of this program, several opportunities have been found to modify distribution system as well as well flushing procedures to reduce the amount of water used during those processes and to save water. So this is not a comprehensive list, but it does show some of the highlights and positive outcomes from the program that were realized by all the utilities as well as a few individual successes. On the other side of the coin, we did find areas where there's opportunity for improvement. Every system who participated had detailed reviews of its water audit and data by the Southwest EFC, and there are a few areas for potential growth. Some of those focus areas include refining utility estimates of apparent losses. So these are things like billing estimates and estimates of water that's used by other city departments, things like that. Closing data gaps that were found during the audit process, and continuing to focus on internal utility engagement and communication when working on water loss. And this last bullet point, that last point about utility engagement, was in some cases our biggest success, where a participant was able to mobilize and engage staff from all over the utility to make a concerted effort on water loss control. And sometimes it was our biggest challenge, where coordination across multiple departments and these really large organizations was a challenge. And so, as was mentioned at the outset, water loss control isn't a one-off effort, and it's our hope that this program really provides a foundation where participants can build from this experience and pursue continuous improvement and growth in these and other challenge areas that were identified by the program. When we step back and reflect on the program as a whole and what we've learned over the past year and a half, there are a number of takeaways. And the biggest one we want to emphasize is that the program was effective, and it was really well received by the participating utility staffs. So this graph on the right shows some of the results from our survey that we distributed, and the results about the experience of those in the program. So there's a list of questions like, has your understanding of non-revenue water improved? Are you equipped to take action to reduce water loss? Do you have plans to take action, etc.? And the bars on the graph represent how many respondents answered that they agree or disagree with these statements. And the survey responses showed that the vast majority of participants agreed that this program had positive outcomes in these areas. And we're really excited to see that so many of the participants felt that they'd improved their knowledge and were able to take actionable measures based on the training and technical assistance provided under this program. Again, reflecting on the program and the lessons learned, we did have some challenges. One of the big ones was the switch to the virtual environment, which had its pros and cons. It was positive that we were able to offer lots and lots of trainings due to the ease of the webinar format, and all of the AMWA members could access and even view those trainings later. We had a number of instances where new staff were hired on at a utility, and they were given access to all these trainings, and they were able to really catch up and get clued in on this program and this material. So that was a really great resource to have these recorded. But we did lose out on some of the more organic learning and information sharing that can happen in person. And it meant we couldn't do as many deep dive workshops or in person, and we had to split our trainings up into more frequent seminars. We also saw that during stages 2 and 3 of the program, participating utilities experienced setbacks when staff became overloaded with work and other priorities, as well as turnover, staff turnover that could hamper the water auditing process if a key person left or was moved to a different department. Thankfully, due to the flexibility of the AMWA members and the Southwest EFC, we were able to overcome these obstacles, but they're important lessons learned for this and future water loss control programs, should they happen. So next I'm gonna move on to the final portion of the presentation and discuss some of the recommendations that our technical expert, the Southwest EFC, has made to the AMWA cities, to AMWA as an organization, as well as recommendations for the Department of Water Resources. And these recommendations are extensively spelled out in the final report for this program, so I'll be covering them generally to give you a high-level sense of what was suggested. First, we have recommendations from the Southwest EFC to the participating AMWA cities. Of course, every participating utility received a whole host of recommendations specific to their system that are documented in various deliverables and reports. Besides that, one of the general recommendations to all participants was to really put in place the structure for management and support of a water loss control program. This includes establishing a team, defining goals, putting in place lines of communication, etc. Water loss control is a huge effort, and it spans across every facet of the utility. And so to see real progress, it needs to be an organizational priority. The last category of recommendations for the participants was geared towards conducting future water loss audits. Recommendations include organizing and documenting water loss data and procedures to preserve institutional knowledge, as well as collecting and analyzing break data from mains and service lines, as well as continuing to refine the data inputs into the water audit and developing system-specific as opposed to default values where possible. The Southwest EFC also made recommendations to AMWA. First, based on the success of the program, the Southwest EFC has advised that AMWA host and sponsor additional water loss trainings for its members where possible. They also recommended that we continue to facilitate information sharing between our members of best practices, policies, and procedures, to organize networking for utility staff, and to encourage the development of internal water loss control goals. Again, in that vein of continuous improvement and always trying to make annual and measured reductions of water loss year to year. Finally, the Southwest EFC encouraged AMWA to continue to advocate support of water loss control efforts, not only within our membership, but also statewide. Next, we have recommendations for ADWR made by the Southwest EFC. First, maybe the most obvious The Southwest EFC recommends that training and technical assistance opportunities like this continue to be expanded throughout the state. All the participating utilities and the data we have showed that it was a well-received and effective program, and it demonstrates that there's an opportunity to continue this style and type of training in other programs and initiatives elsewhere throughout Arizona. A recommendation is made for the department to evaluate its current regulatory requirements for lost and unaccounted for water, to consider advancements in industry standards and approaches, and to do this in future management periods. Finally, the report points out that any opportunities to collaborate with other water-related agencies on water loss control policies and trainings would help to further implementation of best practices throughout Arizona. So that was a high-level overview of the recommendations to the utilities, to AMWA, and to ADWR from our technical expert. At this point in time, as we're wrapping up the program and we're looking at next steps, first of all of the participating utilities have been provided with individual recommendations for improvement of their water loss control program, heaps of data and training recordings, and other program materials, which are all saved electronically for future use. At AMWA, we are coordinating with the Southwest Environmental Finance Center on completing a final report that describes the program in great detail in its entirety, and that report will ultimately be submitted to ADWR. We're happy to say that we are looking to finish this project about 3 months ahead of schedule, as well as $15,000 under our $300,000 budget. And so those funds will remain in the Water Management Assistance Program budget. Of course, this is just the beginning, as the AMWA members will continue to build on the foundation laid by this program and continue to develop their internal water loss control programs. The Southwest Environmental Finance Center has graciously stated that despite their contract and this program coming to a close, they're still available as a resource to ADWR and the participating utilities should they need any assistance or direction on water loss control into the future. And so we really appreciate the Southwest EFC for making themselves available going forward. We want to thank everybody who was involved in this training program, especially the Phoenix GUAC. This council's review and recommendation of this program in 2018 allowed it to move forward after lots of hard work conceiving and scoping and designing the program. The ADWR staff, who have been key partners in administering this program, especially Melissa Sykes, our contract administrator, who's been really great to work with, and all of the participants who spent hours of their time investing into this program to engage and make use of this opportunity. In light of current Colorado River conditions, especially, we think this program really reflects well on all those who are involved and is an example of Arizona's dedication to managing our water supplies. This is a photo from our very first workshop last year that I mentioned. We had in person. It was a great event. We were so excited for this program to get kicked off, and things have changed a lot since then, but we're still very pleased with the outcome and the results of this program. And we appreciate the opportunity today to share this information with you. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Patrick. Are there any questions or comments by committee members?
Frank, this is Dave Roberts. I have a few questions.
Sure, go ahead, Dave.
Thank you. Nice job, Patrick. Thank you for the presentation. I think this project started before I came on to the GUAC. So I just have some fundamental questions. Is there a reason why this was limited just to AMWA members and not non-AMWA cities and maybe even some of the private water companies in the Phoenix AMA?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Roberts. I can answer. I'll do my best. As I mentioned, part of this program started before I came to AMWA and started working on it as well. But my understanding is that at the time of this program's inception, there had already been 2 statewide water loss control training and technical assistance initiatives that had been funded or partly funded by the Department of Water Resources. There was a Phase 1 statewide training program and a Phase 2 statewide training program. Those programs were open to utilities from all across Arizona. One of the impetuses for this program was to design a training and technical assistance program for a more focused group of utilities designed to target more advanced water loss control techniques and apply it to a smaller group of utilities where there'd be more one-on-one assistance. Additionally, there was an idea that AMWA staff could provide a lot of in-kind services and help in the facilitation and administration of the program, taking that load off of the Department of Water Resources.
Okay, with non-AMWA cities and private water companies, for example, EPCOR and Arizona Water Company also having fairly large service areas and quite a few staff involved in their water operations, I would hope that at some point in time, they would be sort of given an opportunity like this as well, especially since they're growing as well. And I think it would be good overall that we get more of the utilities in the Phoenix AMA and around the state for that matter to be involved in this. And I would hope that some of the learnings from this effort could be easily applied and utilized by the others as well as we go along.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Roberts, we certainly agree. And we, as we mentioned in the final report, one of the recommendations from our technical expert was to expand similar training efforts to other utilities. So we wholeheartedly agree. And we've sought to make sure that the lessons learned from this program can be used to make other programs even more successful and more applicable to others.
Okay, thank you. I have one other comment to make, and that is I very much, I work for an organization, SRP, that has a lot of people involved in a lot of different activities on water, and totally agree with the communication and collaboration and the frequency of that communication to better do your job. I think that's fantastic, and I'm glad that you all recognize that in the municipal organizations as well of AMWA. One of the things that perhaps is in the report, well, maybe not, is beyond just setting goals and objectives for good communication, good data collection, things of that nature, and following through on that. To me, it's managers and supervisors holding staff accountable to that level of work and to ensure that it's part of their performance reviews. I'm sure that all of the city personnel have performance evaluations that are done periodically, if not annually. Those types of things are really good as part of their job to be held accountable for doing that, because that will make it an important effort as part of their job overall. I would imagine that the Southwest Finance Center, that they would, Environmental Finance Center would also sort of incorporate that as part of their recommendations as well. I think it just helps to deal with this particular issue. As water costs go up, it's very, very important to pay attention to those water losses. So I would hope that would be part of the recommendations as well, is to bring it down to almost to the employee level there relative to taking ownership and taking accountability for it. Thank you.
Thank you for the suggestion.
You bet.
Other committee members?
Hi, hey, this is Roy Van Pocky. Patrick, how you doing? I agree with Dave. Expand this program as much as you can, because water loss is a big issue from the industry I come from, and it's something that we got to keep our eye on constantly, because you may not see it on the ground, but it may be leaking underneath ground and you don't even know it. And that's why this education, communication, collaboration is so vital, because it's a way to actually use your water more efficiently. Thank you so much.
Other
And
comments?
Bales, I'll weigh in. If what you reported, Patrick, 3 months early and 15,000 light, if that's true, congratulations to the team.
Thank you.
I would like to add my congratulations on the good work done on the project. And I'd also like to add some support to what Dave Roberts suggested. I think it's important as we look, and of course our charge as this GUAC committee is the Phoenix AMA. And I think this particular project has most of the major water entities in the Phoenix AMA. What is not in it is a lot of the water companies outside of the Phoenix AMA. And I think one of the real opportunities is to bring people together in groups that make sense to them with their peers. And I'm not always sure that it's the best approach to bring in somebody from Wilcox or Page and have them sit down with Tucson and Phoenix and talk about their water issues. Wilcox and Page would make more progress sitting down with each other and other smaller companies and sharing their issues. And they would also have greater commitment. So I want to support what David has said as far as spreading this across the state. It's a great idea. And as a matter of fact, I think most of the bigger water providers, the cities, already had some sort of program in place. It might not have been a very complete one, or it might have not been very compatible with other cities, but probably all of these cities were doing something. But it's a great step forward if we took the step, and it probably, I don't know that we'd want to fund it through the Phoenix AMA, but it would be a great step forward if all of the cities and the private water companies in Arizona were engaged in this sort of thing. And so I certainly want to support that proposal. Are there any further comments? Hearing none, thank you very much, Patrick. Excellent presentation. Let's move to agenda item 4, Colorado River update. Craig will provide an update on current Colorado River conditions. Craig?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Vice Chairman Fairbanks, members of the council. For the record, my name is Craig McGinnis. I'm a water resource specialist in the department's Colorado River Management section. I'll be giving an update on status in the basin as of recently. So next slide, please. Looking at the system condition of the entire reservoir system, as of the 19th of September, we see Lake Powell at elevation 3547.06 feet. That's 30% of storage at 7.377 million acre feet. At Lake Mead, 35% storage, 9.0128 million acre feet at an elevation of 1067.63. I looked that up as of this morning. That Mead is 1067.53, down 1/10 of a foot. Powell at 3545.97, down about 1.1 feet. And the other upper basin reservoirs are also down slightly from what you see on the screen, which is typical for operations outside of the runoff season. Looking at the total system contents up in the top left, we're at 38%, 23.188 million acre feet. That is down about 6 million acre feet, or roughly 10% on the system within this since this time last year. Next slide, please. Moving into snow water equivalent seen within the basin, as of this 22nd of September, we peaked at SWE of 89% of median on March 30th. We can also see here on the chart years 2020, 2019, and 2018. The 2020 in green, 2019 in red, 2018 in the teal. We can see 2021 was above the 2018 figure, but below median and close to it 2020, and well below the good net year we saw in 2019. Something we can note here as of quick before we go into the next slide, the antecedent soil conditions within the upper basin particularly were very dry. We saw 89% peak SWE and only saw an annual inflow of roughly 33%. So that really addresses the disparity there. Next slide, please. Going here on the slide, we see Lake Powell unregulated inflow, and the forecasts of 2022 to the right side of the chart are based on Reclamation's September 2021 24-month study. Of all these years that we see are every year since Lake Powell or Glen Canyon Dam was completed. We see water year 2022 forecasts as well as the 2021 observed in the top right corner. 2021 at that 3.56 million acre feet, 33% is the third driest year on record since completion of the dam. It had been flirting with 1977 as the second driest year on record and is projected to beat it out slightly. Hooray. We can look at the new averages on the lines on the chart. Reclamation is moving from its 1981 to 2010 average of 10.83 million acre feet to the average seen in 1991 to 2020 at 9.60 million acre feet. You can see in the various line items in the top left and right how that shifting affects percentage of observed and percentage of projected across the min, most probable, and maximum probable for those time conditions. Next slide, please. Moving into Lake Powell end-of-month elevations, these are also based on the September 2021 24-month study. Looking at end of calendar year 21, the most probable is 3536.62 feet elevation, 27% capacity, with a min to max range of 3536.01 to 3538.59 feet. Looking into end of calendar year 22, most probable 3537.26 feet, that is 28% full, with a min to max range of 3496.56 to 3614.2. We see here that it has in the lines in the legend, these the September 24-month study assumes 181,000 acre feet of releases in the upper basin pursuant to the Drought Response Operations Agreement, or DROA, that are to take place in 2021, finishing up in October later this year, but do not make any further assumptions of such operations into the future. You can see here the mid-elevation release tier is what we're going to be in for 2022. That would be a 7.48 million acre feet, or will be, in 2022. This also in the legend recognizes the 8.23 release in water year 21. Just something to, actually, no, we'll go into that in a later slide. So next slide, please. Moving into Lake Mead end of month elevations, we have seen from the August 24-month study the determination of a tier 1 shortage in 2022. Moving into the end of year, most probable end of year projection at 1066.09 feet, 34% of capacity, with a min to max range of 1065.82 to 1066.76 feet. Going out to the end of calendar year 22, most probable 1050.68 feet, 30% of capacity, with a min to max range of 1047.9 to 1061.19 feet. That most probable 1050 is just over 2/3 of a foot away from being in a tier 2 condition for 2023. Again, we see in the legend the 7.48 in water year 2022. Under the maximum probable inflow scenario, we would be projecting a 9.0 million acre feet release from Glen Canyon Dam in 23, ranging all the way down to a 7.0 million acre feet in the minimum scenario for in water year 2023. Next slide, please. Moving forward, we can see side inflows in the lower basin being inflows in the reach between Glen Canyon down to Hoover Dam. Underperformed the 5-year average from 2016 to 2020 until July, and finally getting into the green, so to speak, in July and August. We can note here the negative number here seen in June 2021. This occurs in the LC's gain-loss model when there's an overall loss in that reach, meaning that losses to evaporation, et cetera, is greater than the gains seen from precipitation and inflow. We can see now that since July and August, we've been again in the green in the end of year projections of a 70% average in this reach for the water year and 75% for the calendar year. Next slide, please. Here on the screen, we see a 5-year probability table based on Reclamation's August 21 CRSS run. We see only the stress test, which is different from what you've seen in prior model runs moving forward. We have seen both the stress test and full observed hydrology run through this model. Reclamation is moving with only the stress test in future runs. We can see here the 7.48 million acre feet mid-elevation released here in 2022. Moving into 2023, the probabilities, there's a 38% probability of seeing back-to-back mid-elevation releases, a 16% probability of moving back up to upper elevation balancing tier, and a 47% probability of falling into the lower elevation balancing tier. We can also address here the bottom of the chart of minimum power pool at the end of the calendar year versus any month falling below that number. They are the same across the board. The way that we have read that is of all the analyzed traces, none of them bounce back from below power pool and then stay till the end of the calendar year. For those of you looking for some good news, the equalization chances in the out years of 25 and 26 are up to 6%, based up from 4% for 2025 in June. That is the extent of my good news. Next slide, please. Look into how that affects Mead 5-year probabilities. We will be in, again, a tier 1 shortage in 2022 based on the determination made from the August 24-month study. That will require a 512,000 acre foot Arizona contribution to Lake Mead. Based on the August model run that we see here, there's a 95% probability of any amount of shortage in 2023, broken down into 75% in Tier 1, 22% in Tier 2. We can look at the shortage probabilities in any amount going to be above 90% into the out years through 2026. I would be remiss to not note the 41% probability based on this run of Tier 3 reductions in 25 and 26, which would be when Mead is under elevation 1025. Next slide, please. That is the end of my section of the update. That is my email above. On the below, we have a couple links to the Colorado Basin Forecast Center, river operations in the lower and upper Colorado basins, and a link to the Arizona Reconsultation Committee website. So with that, Mr. Vice Chair, I will take any questions.
You're on mute there, Frank. Craig, I have some questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Can you go back to the SWE, the snow water equivalent slide? I guess one of my questions, Craig, is has the department done any analysis to look at when that peak occurs during the year? Has it changed from 20 years ago, 10 years ago? Is it the same time frame as it has been historically, or is it peaking earlier? Anything? Has the department done any research on that?
Mr. Roberts, I know this is definitely something that we are at least keeping on the brain. I don't believe such a study has been made. I know we just filled out a section for our drought preparedness report that the peak since 2020 compared to 2021, it was 1 week earlier in 2021. I don't know how that would be reflected across the period in which you mentioned.
Okay. I don't know. I think that would be an interesting research project for one of your interns. Another one that I'd be interested in is looking at the relationship between the antecedent moisture going into the year versus the peak and versus the actual runoff from April to July and see what that correlation is. It just might give you some more predictive values when you, as you follow this through the year. Obviously, this is a Bureau of Reclamation responsibility, but I think it's an interesting research project for a student to look at, or an intern to look at. So I just throw that out to you as well. Anything we can do to help better predict where we're going to be is going to be helpful for all of us. So just a point of bringing that up as potential research projects.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. I appreciate that comment. I will keep that in mind. That's definitely something we are all monitoring into the future. So thank you.
Thank you. That's all I have, Frank.
Thank you. Other committee members, questions, comments?
Frank, could I ask Craig a question on the inflows?
Sure.
Craig, on your chart on inflows, could you bring that up again? The one that showed by the month, I think, kind of captured the above average on June and July, or July, August, was it? Which one was that? There we go. Yeah, I wanted to see that again. Inflow. And on those numbers, July and August, I mean, that's summer rains. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so the 5-year average we saw from 2016 to 2020, those would be likely attributed to the monsoon activity. Particularly, we saw up there in July, and then August was still enough to be above the 100%, above average in August as well. So I believe that would be an astute point. Thank you.
No, that's good to see. I was glad to see that because I know what we've experienced on our farm. So I'm glad to see that up in the range. And I think it was Mr. Estlin at our last meeting, and he predicted a non-soon for this summer. So I'm glad he was wrong. This is some news where somebody was wrong.
I'm always happy whenever he's pessimistic and wrong. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Craig, we won't ask whatever happened to Brett, though.
Summarizing, looking for the year ahead, did I understand that the most likely outlook for next year is a tier 2 cutback for Arizona?
So looking here on Lake Mead, based on the most probable end of calendar year, that puts it at 1050, which is just above that. This is the most probable is based on the 50th percentile of all of the traces run. So that is, again, modeling out into the future more than 12 months. We will keep you abreast of those as they develop. But at this point, based on the 50th percentile of traces run, we are 2/3 of a foot above that. If that were to happen exactly, we would still be in a tier 1 shortage condition.
Okay, so the most probable is tier 1, but it's very narrow over compared to tier 2. I take very little reduction to spring us to a tier 2.
Being any below the 50th percentile, you'd be living on the edge of that 1050 one way or the other.
Okay, thank you. But any further questions? Hearing none, thank you very much. Excellent briefing. Let's move ahead to agenda item 5, Arizona Water Bank. Go ahead. Oh, Arizona Water Bank Authority preliminary 2022 plan of operation. Virginia's with us, and she will present the AWBA 2022 preliminary plan of operation. Thank you, Virginia. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the council. It's great to be back again. We do come here once every year. We're looking for input, comment on our preliminary plan of operation, both from the council and from the public. So next slide, please. So as Craig pointed out, next year will be a Tier 1 shortage condition. Based on that, we don't expect any water available to the bank. And actually, that's probably going to hold true for the next several years, based on the data that was provided by Craig. So to continue to help achieve our goals, we need to look through other means, including long-term storage credit purchases, as well as purchasing intentionally created surplus firming credits from the Gila River Indian community. That's an agreement we have with the community under DCP. That's part of the offset component of the Arizona Implementation Plan. So next year, given that we have our first ever shortage, we also have our first ever firming obligation for the Gila River Indian community. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on. So next slide, please. So even though we don't have any water to store for next year, we include the recharge rates in the preliminary plan because these rates are utilized to determine what our credit purchase price will be under the agreements that we have. So with the water delivery rate of $242 an acre foot and the CAP underground storage facility rates of $13 per acre foot in the Phoenix AMA and $15 per acre foot in the Tucson AMA, we're looking at roughly a $271 per acre foot credit purchase price in the Phoenix AMA, and that includes taking into consideration the 5% cut to the aquifer plus a 1% loss. So 271 in the Phoenix AMA and 273 in the Tucson AMA. Next slide, please. So this table identifies the funding sources that we have available for our 22 plan of operation. So under the withdrawal fees, the amounts that we have available include the 1.2 million reduction. Those are funds that the legislature made available to the Department of Water Resources. For the Phoenix AMA, we're looking at just over 866,000, and we're going to utilize those monies to purchase the intentionally created surplus or ICS firming water from the community. We're looking at developing just under 3,000 acre feet of credits from that. And again, there's a 10% evaporation loss reduction from the ICS. So the agreement that we have was for purchasing 50,000 acre feet of firming ICS, which results in 45,000 acre feet of ICS firming credits. In the Tucson AMA, we have $396,000, and we're looking at purchasing long-term storage credits of roughly 1,450 acre feet. So for the water storage tax, also known as the 4-cent tax, the CAWCD board, in their resolution that they adopted last June, reserved $4 million for the water bank for credit purchases in Maricopa County, or the Phoenix AMA, and they reserved $3 million in the Tucson AMA. So in the Phoenix AMA, we're looking at purchasing, we have a target amount of 14,740 acre feet. In the Tucson AMA, just under 11,000 acre feet. So the cost of the total plan for 2022 is roughly $8.26 million. And we're looking at developing 30,140 acre feet of credits. Next slide, please. So you've seen this table before, but we've made some changes. So in the column with numbers on the left, that identifies the credits that we have available for meeting our various objectives, or credits that we have specifically dedicated for that purpose. The next column over identifies the credits that we anticipate using next year in order to meet our firming objectives. And then the column after identifies credits remaining. And then this last column is something new that we're doing. We used to always show the percentage of goal that we met, and the goals were basically based on modeling that was conducted in, when the bank was established, back in 96, 97. So rather than showing those, the new volumes are really based on hydrologic modeling results that we reported on last December. And these are really intended to try to provide a range of how many credits we anticipate needing over the next 100 years. So for the M&I firming, that goes through 2120, and for the settlement obligations, that goes through 2107. So they're modeling results that we presented last year, but we anticipate those changing over time to reflect new information, new hydrologies, new operating systems on the Colorado. And really it's to gauge how many credits we have versus how many we think we're going to need going forward. So for the tribal settlement obligations, you can see for the Gila River Indian community, we have an obligation to firm next year. We're looking at firming 8,112 1,000 acre feet, and we're looking at using the firming credits that we developed on reservation. The firming credits are credits that we received by offsetting the full water delivery cost of water that was delivered on reservation. So it was the community's water, but the water being paid for that water, both the energy and the O&M costs of that water. And for that, the community agreed that they would accept the credit instead of receiving a direct delivery through CAP. So the 8,112 acre feet is the best estimate that we have now. That amount can change once CAP reviews all of the water orders that are placed by October 1. So, you see here the amount of credits that we've accrued specifically using the 4-cent tax that's used for CAP M&I firming. For on-river firming, those are general fund credits, and the ones identified for the community, those identified are the credits that we accrued either on reservation or as the ICS firming credits that I discussed earlier. So these are credits specifically dedicated for meeting any firming requirement for the community. At the bottom, you see the groundwater management credits, also known as the withdrawal fee credits. These credits can also be used either for CAP M&I firming or for meeting tribal settlement obligations. So in the event we don't have enough credits for either one of those other categories, we can utilize the water management credits as well. I think that's everything I wanted to cover here. There was one more thing. So this is more for the Tucson AMA. Under the Arizona Water Settlements Act, we were required to provide $3 million to reclamation, essentially, to assist in their requirement to firm the Tohono O'odham Nation. We did that by accruing an equivalent amount of long-term storage credits, the 34,000 acre feet of credits you see there. So for next year to meet a firming obligation for the Tohono O'odham Nation, the reclamation could have requested some of those credits be made available. I guess they could still do that, but they haven't at this point in time. So we still have all of those credits available. So next slide, please. So here, I'm open to hear any questions you might have or the public might have on the water banking plan. You'll see the full the full plan at the December meeting where the Water Banking Commission adopts the plan of operation for next year. So with that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Virginia. Excellent report. Any committee members with questions or comments?
Frank, this is Dave. I have a question for Virginia.
Okay.
First of all, I like your picture here. Where is that from?
It was provided by SNWA. I think it's in the upper reaches. I'm not certain.
Okay, it's pretty. It's a really nice spot. Can you back up to the previous slide? The question I have relates to the 8,112 for the Gila River Indian community. Is that anticipated to be a delivery to them of wet water or something else?
No, these were essentially deliveries that were already made. We had an agreement with the community where we basically offset their water delivery costs. I want to say it was in the 2015, 2016 through 2019 or 18 timeframe, where we paid for their water delivery costs and got a 1-for-1 on the acre feet delivered. And so the total there, you can see in the left-hand column, was 44,000 acre feet. So when there is a firming obligation, we basically just deduct from that 44,000 acre feet, and the community agreed to pump that water instead because that water was already delivered.
Okay, I better understand that now, so I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Virginia, could we go back one more or maybe two more charts? Try one more. Okay, this is the one. No, they go back. There you go. I see at the heading at the top, estimated funds available and estimated funds utilized and the credits that would be developed. And I know in putting together a budget, you always show that this is how much money you're going to spend, and you always, in preparing the budget, show that it's going to be spent. But my question is, I appreciate this is the way it's done, but are there credits available such that you really will be able to expend these funds to acquire the credits you show as a real matter? I know as a budget you have to propose it this way, but in fact, will you be able to expend these funds to get that amount of credits?
Correct. So the potential is there. We do have certain agreements in place. So while they are longer term agreements, and some of them may be expiring, it's an annual decision between the parties. So we have the funding available if they do in fact want to sell credits to the bank and the bank wants to purchase those. If they choose not to sell credits, maybe they have, another partner in mind, the bank can still go out and look for other opportunities to purchase credits utilizing those monies. And we may be successful or we may be not on that.
I guess what
I hope we are.
I guess what I'm asking without asking is we know things have tightened up with the shortage on the river, and in the new environment of shortage with less water available, is it still generally possible to pick up credits, or have things tightened to the point where it is extremely difficult or impossible to pick up credits?
Well, I'll answer this way. We have a target price, and that's, in our agreements, and we've always tried to stay within the same price as what we would have paid if we were storing the water. I think the cost of credits, well, I know the cost of credits have gone up. We could, I'm sure the money could be spent, we could purchase those credits, but in all likelihood, we would be paying a much higher cost per acre foot. So that, then that would be a question. The agreement, if there is another agreement, would have to be brought to the commission to see if, there was a willingness to pay those additional costs.
I wouldn't be a bit surprised that those kind of difficulties and realities may be facing us in the years ahead if this continues, where the commission might have to consider paying more.
I would point out that the cost per acre foot for the credit purchases, they're in the ballpark of what we're paying for the ICS firming credits. Those are just over $260 per acre foot. So just to put things into perspective.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further questions? Hearing none, we appreciate your presentation, Virginia, and we'll move to the next item.
Okay. Thank you very much.
The next item, agenda item 6, groundwater withdrawal fee recommendation and WMAP. This is always one of our favorite topics each year, and one of the easiest things we deal with. And I guess Kyle will review withdrawal fee rates and money that's been collected in the past 5 years and provide current WMAP update. Kyle?
Thank you, Vice Chair, members of the council. As you said, I will be providing a water management assistance program update, and then we'll be requesting your recommendation for 2022 withdrawal fees. Withdrawal fees for the year 2021 are set at $3.25 per acre foot, as they have been since 2017. Of that, 25 cents goes towards the water management assistance program, 50 cents goes towards administration and enforcement, and $2.50 towards the water bank. Today, GUAC members are asked to make a recommendation to the ADWR director regarding the rate of withdrawal fees for reporting year 2022, which will then be collected in calendar year 2023. And for your reference, this table here provides the withdrawal fee rates and money collected from the past 5 years, and the highlighted sections under 2022 are the withdrawal fee statutory framework. The component of the fee that goes towards the WMAP, and that's money that's set aside for conservation, augmentation, and research of water availability in the AMA, cannot exceed $2 per acre foot. The admin and enforcement component needs to be between 50 cents and $1 per acre foot, and the water bank portion is set at $2.50 per acre foot. Below this table is a breakdown of the current Water Management Assistance Program fund. The current balance of that fund is $882,521, of which $716,785 is committed. That leaves a total balance of $115,736 available. And I'll note that that number does not include the $15,000 that Patrick referenced earlier, so the real number is a little bit closer to $130,000. Moving on, the projects that are currently funded with the Water Management Assistance Program Fund are Smartscape, which has a remaining balance of $93,930, Water Conservation Management Program, which has a remaining balance of $33,000, and that project was also renewed for $216,000 over 2 years at our previous meeting. The Water Loss Technical Assistance Program has a remaining balance of $60,000. Xeriscape Demonstration Garden has a remaining balance of $75,000. Residential Water Use Phase 2 has a remaining balance of $139,000. Arizona Project Wet has a remaining balance of $67,500. And the DCP Grant Project Leak Detection Equipment Replacement has a remaining balance of $32,355 in WMAP funds. The groundwater conservation grants are nearly all executed in the Phoenix AMA, with the remainder being EPCOR's contract, which is currently out for signature. So we've made progress there as well. Before asking the members to recommend withdrawal fee rate for reporting year 2022, we'll be happy to answer any questions on this document or anything that I've mentioned previously.
Thank you, Kyle. Any questions from the committee on what's been presented up to this point?
Kyle, I have a question for you. I'm trying to recall, but is the water bank contribution, the $2.50, is that in statute, and that's why it's set there and it can't be changed unless the statute's changed?
Yes, you're correct.
Okay.
And is the same true for administration and enforcement?
The statute for administration and enforcement says that it needs to be between 50 cents and $1. So it has that max min, but it doesn't specify an amount.
So this is the minimum that's there now. It could be increased, but what's there
Correct.
is there's no way around the 50 cents. It's already there.
You're right, and it could be increased to $1 if you'd like, but no more.
Further questions on the report? Let me add that I'm really pleased to see so many of these programs under contract. And it demonstrates a really large amount of work by the staff to get them done. In past years, we've approved a series of programs to save water, and it's often taken a very long time to get them under contract. And it looks like you all have on staff done an excellent job of getting them under contract. That also means, of course, that the money is being spent to save water, and the amount that's left over is left. But there's really been some excellent work this year in getting them to the point where we're actually doing work in the community. So thank you very much about that.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Go ahead.
I was going to say it's been a lot of phenomenal work by Melissa, our WMAP coordinator. She's been really doing good work for that. If the council doesn't mind, I would like to provide a little bit of context, a little more context before you start making recommendations or motions for the withdrawal fee. So you currently are funding 4 projects on a recurring basis, and those total out to about $250,000 per year. As you can see, looking at this table, the amounts coming into the WMAP fund are currently about $200,000 a year. So you are cutting into your $115,000, $130,000 budget each year if you decide to continue funding those 4 projects at the same amount. You do have enough in that balance, the $115 to $130, to cover 2021 and 2022 if you do not want to raise the WMAP withdrawal fees. But if you decide to go that route, you will need to raise the WMAP portion of the fee next year if you'd like to continue funding those 4 projects at the same rates.
Kyle, next year meaning 2022 or 2023?
2023. So the 2023 withdrawal fee, 1 calendar year from now.
We would vote a year from now for 2023, correct? So
Correct.
do I have that right?
Yes, you're right.
So although it's 2023, we'd be taking the vote next year to recommend that.
Yes, if you would like to, if you decide not to raise the WMAP portion of the fee this year, you will need to next year if you would like to keep funding those 4 projects at the same level.
And Kyle, how much would we need to raise to next year if we did nothing this year? And how much would we need to raise this year if we took care of it this year?
So the difference is only about $50,000 a year, which isn't a huge number. Looking that you pull in about $200,000 a year in the WMAP fund, 10 cents to 15 cents would cover it. If you wanted a little bit more money to invest in other projects, do some more conservation, 25 cents, an additional 25 cents would give you another $150,000 a year or so.
Now, does that calculation or those amounts hold true whether we do something this year or whether we put it off till next year or we put it off to the year after that?
So if you did nothing this year, your WMAP balance would be getting close to 0. And then if you raised it by a quarter next year, you would have about $150,000 balance at that point.
So raising it 10 or 15 cents this year would save raising it 25 cents next year? Is that what I'm hearing? Or is it all the same? I mean, I'm not sure whether we want to raise it at all, but would raising it 10 cents or 15 cents this year allow it to stay with 10 or 15 cents next year?
Yeah, so you can do that, or you can increase it 25 cents either year. It depends on the flexibility that the GUAC would like to have and whether you're interested in funding other projects ultimately. If you increase it the 10 to 15 cents, there'll be a little bit of money left over. Either you can do it this year or next year, it doesn't make a huge difference. Or if you raise it a quarter this year or next year, it just comes down to when you'll have some additional money to fund additional projects.
Kyle, is there anything else you'd like to add before we discuss some of these issues, or are there any other questions by the committee?
I have a question there, Frank, based on the conversations you've been having. But
Go
I'll let Stephen and Rory go first if they've got any before I ask mine.
Stephen, Rory?
My only comment is I do like these conservation programs going forward because of the drought and the situation we're in right now. It seems like they've been very successful. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Rory?
My comment was I wanted to hear what Dave had to say before I had to go. I was thinking, I think Dave knows where I'm going to come from as an ag representative on here. I don't want to raise fees. Programs
Yes.
are fine. If we have something coming down the road, we'll address it then. We might even want next year to go in more depth ahead of this meeting instead of deciding right now on the cuff. I'm hearing that we are not in an imminent shortage. We have funds in the bank. I think everybody's facing increases across our great nation for various reasons today and in the near future. If you've bought tanker loads of diesel fuel lately, you'd know what I'm talking about. We have the ability to hold the line here, and that's where I'm aimed at. Thank you.
Good point of
Thank you,
view.
Stephen. So Kyle, I have a couple of questions. Do you know what happened in 2016 where the amount collected for WMAP was so large compared to the other 4 years?
Yeah, so the WMAP collection in 2016 was 50 cents per acre foot. And then 2017, it was cut in half to 25 cents per acre foot.
Okay,
So that's
so
the difference.
It's right there in front of me. I can see it right now. Thank you. So the other piece of this is, are the recovery withdrawal fees within this too, or is it just from the pumping of groundwater?
So the recovery fees are in the total at the bottom, but none of that portion goes to the WMAP or admin and enforcement or the water bank.
And is there a reason why it doesn't?
That's just how the recovery fee is set in statute. There's just not a water management assistance program associated with it.
Does that money then just go to the department for their administrative use?
I'm not totally sure where the long-term storage recovery withdrawal fees go, but that's something we can look into and get back to you after the meeting.
It is considered separate though, because that water is not considered to be groundwater pumping.
Right.
Yeah, I understand that. What's interesting to me is that our recovery of long-term storage credit is likely to go up over the next so many years, given the fact that the shortages are likely to get deeper and more widespread. And I think that probably requires a statutory change to be able to maybe utilize some of those funds towards the WMAP. But it seems to me to be pretty logical relative to you have less water, and if you can fund programs for people to use less water and do it in a way that's not impacting the ability of water users overall, I think that could be something to look into. I don't know what the recovery fee amount has been over the years and whether it's also in total. And I don't know if that fee changes over time. I think it's just $1 right now, and I don't know how it even changes and whether or not it's a department's prerogative as to whether that changes or if it's held in statute. It's just something I think that we ought to look into going forward because of the fact that those long-term storage credits are likely to be recovered. So going forward. So thank you.
Now, this is Frank Fairbanks, Chair. Kyle, we're asked to give a recommendation on these withdrawal fees because they are related to groundwater, of course. Are these other fees that Dave brings up, is that a GUAC issue or is that in some other part of the organization?
So that is not part of the GUAC. The recovery fees, I believe, are set in statute each year at the $1 amount.
So those fees may need to be raised or lowered or stayed the same. But as far as our committee is concerned, we don't have a horse in that race. Certainly we can comment about it and suggest a change. But that really isn't a part of what we deal with.
You are right, yes.
Frank, we can always make recommendations to the director on anything, but with respect to being able to set the groundwater pump tax fee, you're right, we're stuck. But it doesn't mean that I think we're limited to also suggesting other things the department could look into. I don't know how the recovery fees would affect the department's overall budget, but it's just something to think about. And maybe we could recommend a recommendation on that, maybe not. And maybe we can discuss it at another time.
Okay. Well,
So I'll make a motion, Frank.
Okay, go ahead and make your, well, let me make a comment and then you can make your motion. And we've been through this a few times. But I guess from my perspective, and this won't surprise anyone, is that water supplies have tightened up and water users are in different levels of distress. And I think it is really important that we be able to maintain or even expand programs that would reduce the problem by finding water savings. So my personal bias is to do whatever's necessary to guarantee continued funding for I think generally all of us believe, or at least in the past, everybody's expressed support for these programs that we funded, and that we ought to look for even further additional good programs, not to throw money at programs that don't work, but we ought to be looking for additional good programs to save more. So that's just to share my perspective, which sounds like it's pretty close to Rory's position too. But with that, let me go to the floor for a motion. Dave, do you have a motion you'd like to make?
Yes, I do, and I appreciate your comments, Frank, and I also appreciate Rory's, but I also understand Stephen's situation as well, especially his first year on the GUAC here. And before I make my motion, I truly do agree with you with respect to being able to continue to fund these programs because I think they're very, very important. And I think they help a lot of people. And it's critical that we have a much more concerted conservation and water use efficiency ethic in this state beyond even where we're at today. And we're good today, but there's more to do. And I think helping to fund those programs is important. I am hopeful that we can find other sources of funding to help with that. And that's why I raised some of these other ideas. I also think it's important for Stephen to survey his constituency at some point in time and have a conversation about this maybe earlier next year than we have this year, so that we can get a better sense of where the ag community will be on this long term. Because it has been static for, it's been static now for 4 years and or 5 years with respect to the fee. So we just need to have a conversation about that in the agricultural community. So with that, I will make a motion to recommend to the director that we keep the withdrawal fee at the total of $3.25, and that the categories that we have here on the table for 2021 and the amounts that are there for 2021 be carried forward to the recommendation for 2022. That's my motion.
There is a motion.
MBL seconds.
And there is a second. Is the motion adequate guidance? And of course, this is our recommendation to the director, which generally he has followed, but this is a recommendation. We don't actually adopt the fee. Any questions on the motion or comments? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed signify by saying no. No. So Rory, I think you voted yes.
Yes.
Okay, I could.
Sorry, I should have said Rory, aye.
No, it's okay. No problem. We just need to record the vote. And the
Gotcha.
vote is 3-1 with Dave, Rory, and Stephen voting in favor of the motion, and the vice chair voting in opposition. And of course, this will come up again next year. And I guess David has asked that next year we try to in the meeting before we have to vote, have some kind of bring us up to speed briefing. Is that what you suggested, David?
Yes. Yes, I think that's important. I think Stephen and I ought to spend some time talking more about this and how I think surveying some of the agribusiness groups within the Phoenix AMA to see what their willingness is to maybe raise the limit, raise the tax a little higher, the fee a little higher, and then just again see what the willingness of it is, especially if we can use the dollars for the WMAP process, and if it's tied into some other revenue sources, maybe there's a compromise here to do both and to make it really, really important for the WMAP program. So that's my thinking. So I don't know if Stephen's open for that, but that's my thinking on it.
I'll go with you. I'll stand at the back and let you promote it. Speak to it.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
okay. I'm going to retire in about a year, so I can take all the arrows you want, and I'll be retiring and off onto the distance.
Yeah, you're safe. Yeah, now you're bold. Okay, I understand.
That's all right. Frank retired a long time ago, and he's still on the GUAC, so it doesn't mean I'm out of that picture necessarily.
So I would be really surprised if the people that paid the fee supported an increase.
I understand.
Whether
I
they're
want to try to get some cover, Frank.
I'm with you. Whether they're buying tankers full of diesel fuel or not.
I understand.
I just, and I understand where you're coming from, and I have family in agriculture, and I know the financial pressures that are on ag these days, they're real. I think, though, that, I lost, but I think one of the things we need to keep in mind is we have to look at the long-term solution and improvement, because, we'd all wish that all of a sudden we'd be getting gushers on the Colorado, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. And it looks like the pressures are going to get worse before they get better. So I think we need to be looking at programs and things we can do that might make more water available, or at least slow any decline in the availability of water. So that's why I am supportive of good effective programs that might make it possible for people to get by on less water and relieve the stress that many people are in, including the agricultural community. So with that, we've got a clear vote and a clear recommendation, and we will move on to Kyle. Is that adequate? Anything else you need?
Hey, Frank, I just
That's
want to
all.
state something. Maybe next year or two, there's more preparation, like you said, a meeting ahead to discuss this more detail. And then, because some of this is transitory inflation, they keep telling me, and I'm seeing it in my end of the world, and it's not transitory yet. So,
Yeah.
but maybe next year it'll be better, and there'll be people more willing, because I do think these programs are good too.
Thank you very much. So I think we all agree that sort of a preparatory discussion before the next time we vote would be beneficial to us all.
Yes.
It may or may not change votes, but at least it gives us a chance to be educated and to be aware of all of the factors and issues. So let's do that. Let's move on to agenda item 7. Jenna will now provide us with a Governor's Water Augmentation, Innovation, and Conservation Council update. Jenna?
Good afternoon, Vice Chair and members of the Council. My name is Jenna Norris, and I coordinate the Governor's Water Augmentation, Innovation, and Conservation Council, herein referred to as just the Governor's Water Council. Thank you for having me. Next slide. I thought we would start today by taking a look at our website, where all of the past meeting materials are posted. Thank you. So if you look on the right-hand side on that navigation pane, there's council activities as well as each of the committees listed. Melissa, if you click on council activities and scroll down. So if you click on meetings for for the council or any of the committees, you'll see all of the meeting materials posted for every meeting that the council and committees have had, including the meeting recordings, agenda, presentation, any outcomes. I wanted to share this, as well as if you scroll up. If you look at the meetings calendar there on your navigation pane, that also is a quick way to access all of our upcoming meetings. So if you click on, for example, the post-2025 committee meeting that occurred on the 9th, that would have the meeting materials from that meeting as it already occurred. And if you went forward to the month of October, you'll see some of our scheduled upcoming meetings, and those would have the login information as well as an agenda once it's posted. So I just wanted to share that there's a lot of information on our website. So if you're ever curious about digging into a particular committee, this is somewhere that you can find a lot of the previous materials. Thank you. Slide. So council updates. I'm sure you all know the council meets quarterly, and they last met on September 16th. The meeting recording for that meeting is linked on this slide. Chairman Director Bushatsky started the meeting off with a Colorado River update, covering much of the same information that Craig shared with you all this morning, or this afternoon rather. Director Bushatsky did point out that the lower basin states will be operating at Tier 1, and he did highlight that in the August 24-month study, the minimum probable inflow shows the elevation falling below 1030 by July of 2023, And the chairman pointed out that as part of the drought contingency plan, an adaptive management element was included that requires, if the minimum probable elevation falls below 1030, that Arizona, California, and Nevada consult with the Department of Interior to look at taking additional actions to protect Lake Mead from going below elevation 1020. Next, the committee shared updates with the council. I will go into details on those committee updates in the following slides. And finally, Natalie Mast, AMA Director in charge of management plans, here in the room with me this morning, shared a high-level overview of the management plan conservation requirements and highlighted the successes, particularly of the Agriculture BMP Advisory Committee in advancing those agriculture best management practices and that program for the 5MP. So this is the agenda on your slide that we went through for that council meeting. The next meeting, I will note, is December 9th at 10 a.m. Next slide. Thank you, Melissa. Committee updates. So the first committee to share updates was the non-AMA Groundwater Committee, chaired by Representative Griffin and Jamie Kelly. This committee has not yet met in 2021, but is planning a meeting for October 14th from 10 a.m. to noon. The login information for that meeting, as well as the agenda, is now posted to our website and linked on this slide. Moving on to the Desalination Committee. That committee is chaired by Henry Day. The committee had last met on August 26th, during which they'd heard a presentation by ADWR counsel Jennifer Heim on brackish groundwater and Arizona law. Henry Day provided to the council a thorough overview of all of the work of the committee to date, covering what they had worked on and explored, and then he did share a detailed summary of the work of the Legal and Regulatory Subcommittee, and the work of that committee really culminated in the presentation given to the full committee by Jennifer Heim at the August meeting. Henry stated that after a thorough exploration of the legal and regulatory barriers to the use of brackish groundwater, the committee had found that there are no legal or regulatory constraints specific to the use of brackish or poor quality groundwater in Arizona law. Brackish or poor quality groundwater is simply groundwater and subject to the legal and regulatory constraints of groundwater. Henry then shared the committee's two recommendations with the council, which were to continue regulating brackish groundwater as it is, and that the committee be put on standby until recalled for additional work. These recommendations were both accepted by the council. And all of this is on your screen, of course, those two recommendations particularly outlined there. Next slide. Thank you. Moving on to the Long-Term Water Augmentation Committee, chaired by Wade Noble. The committee last met on August 3rd and heard a presentation from ADWR Senior Research Hydrologist Keith Nelson on the opportunity in certain areas of the state to enhance the natural recharge process. His presentation covered a lot, but he started with Nogales, Arizona as an example of an area that benefits from periodic and renewable flood recharge. And then he moved north to Prescott AMA, sharing the potential for enhanced recharge in Granite Creek. The committee engaged in discussion following the presentation and determined that it would take time to fully explore the topic, but plan to continue this conversation in subsequent meetings. So moving on to the activities of the Storage Sites Subcommittee of the Long-Term Water Augmentation Committee. Wade shared that the committee had successfully delivered the joint ADWR and State Land Department 2021 report titled Potential Water Storage Sites on State Trust Land. This report is linked on this slide as well and is posted to our website. The report was delivered to the required recipients as outlined in House Bill 2249 and included 331 potential underground storage sites located on state trust land. Accompanying this report will be a draft guide to selecting underground water storage sites. We, as in the ADWR staff, are currently working on incorporating comments that we received from stakeholders involved in that subcommittee, and we hope to finalize that report in the very near future. Moving on to the post-2025 AMAs committee, chaired by Cheryl Lombard and Warren Kenny. This committee has been very busy and had met twice since the last quarterly council meeting in July. So at the July council meeting, the committee co-chairs had shared with the council their strategy to approach the identified issues, which had been detailed in the issue brief produced by that committee earlier in the year. Again, that's of course published to our website. The committee determined that they would focus their efforts on 3 identified issues, which are groundwater in the Assured Water Supply Program, unreplenished groundwater demand, and the hydrologic disconnect. The committee met on June 22nd and tackled the identified issue of groundwater in the Assured Water Supply by hearing a presentation from ADWR Chief Hydrologist Jeff Inwood and ADWR Deputy Counsel Aisha Vora. The committee met again on August 10th and heard a presentation from myself as well as Natalie Mass on unreplenished groundwater demand. And the committee last met on September 9th and heard a presentation on hydrologic disconnect. This presentation was a bit different than the previous 2 in that we looked at it from 3 angles. So the committee heard a presentation from myself, from Krista McJunkin of SRP, and from Vivian Bahi of CAGRD. Again, the approach was to tackle the hydrologic disconnect from 3 different angles, looking at the current state and location of recovery wells to recharge, annual storage versus long-term storage credit recovery, potential future long-term storage credit recovery, and finally locations of pumping and replenishment. The next meeting for the post-2025 AMA committee is scheduled for October 5th, and the committee will hear a presentation on the concepts derived from the Prescott AMA Exempt Well Work Group. The login information for this meeting is posted and linked on the slide. And the committee meets again in October, as you'll see on the slide in front of you, on October 27th, at which time they will start to tackle development of solutions. The committee's plan for that phase is to fine-tune the most realistic strategies and solutions brought forth over those 3 meetings that I shared and identify the most realistic strategies and solutions brought forth. Next slide. I know that was a lot of information. It gives you a taste of how busy the council and committees have been. And so my contact information is listed here on the slide, as well as John Riggins, who's the statewide planning manager. And I'm happy to take any questions at this time if you have them. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you, Jenna. That was extensive, but it really sounds like a lot is going on. Any questions for Jenna from the committee?
I have one, Frank.
Go ahead.
And Jenna, thank you for your presentation. The comment that I want to make is I just want to tell you you're doing a fantastic job as the council coordinator. Whoever your boss is, they should give you a little raise here for this. I think it's been tremendous. I'm a member of the council. I always get information on time, accurate information. You really keep us apprised of what's going on. So I really appreciate your coordination of this group. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much. That means a lot to me. Thank you.
Any other comments by the committee? Thank you again, Jenna. And why don't we move on to item 8, and Natalie will provide a 5th management plan update. Natalie?
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chair Fairbanks and members of the council. Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Like I said earlier, like you just said, my name is Natalie Nest, and I'm the AMA Director responsible for the management plans. Today I'll be providing a little bit of information on some upcoming milestones for the 5th management plan and talk about what our next steps are for the GUACs and for public comments on those plans. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as many of you know, as I'm sure you all know, the management plans are outlined in statute, and those plans contain the mandatory conservation programs for each of the AMAs, which are intended to be designed to reduce withdrawals of groundwater. So those statutes lay out the requirements for a series of 5 management plans, and we're currently working on the draft and then the adoption of the 5th in that series. Next slide, please. This slide lays out a little bit of our timeline over the last couple of years and our development process. So we've been working over the last couple of years through our management plan work groups and subgroups to analyze the existing programs and to design updated or new conservation programs for the 5th management plans. Right now, we are working to build out the concepts that were developed in that process. We have a 5th management plan's concepts webpage that provides some information on each of the concepts for conservation programs that were developed through that process. And we're working internally right now to actually write those concepts into the 5th management plans. We intend to publish those initial drafts early next year. And also early next year, we will provide links to those drafts to the GUACs and to the stakeholders, to the public for initial feedback, informal feedback, and for recommendations from the GUACs. With that timeline, the publication of initial drafts early next year, we also intend to start the promulgation or legal adoption process for those plans next year and complete the adoption of all 5 5th management plans next year. That timeline allows the conservation programs in those plans to become effective on January 1st, 2025. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is a link and a screenshot of that concepts page that I mentioned a moment ago. I would really encourage you all, if you have not visited this page, to please do so. We have draft regulatory language for each of the concepts that we're moving forward with posted on this page. It's intended as kind of a template, so you'll see that it's kind of an example that'll be copied over and customized to each management plan, to each active management area when we publish those initial plans early next year. But we are working very hard to be faithful to the concepts that are posted on this page and that we discussed throughout the work group process. Next slide, please. So for the GUAC and for the members of this council, the role of the GUAC with regard to the management plans is laid out in statute, which is to comment on the draft plans before they are promulgated. So with that, next slide, please. We wanted to give you all a little bit of a heads up. So we do plan to seek recommendations from the GUAC on that draft 5th management plan for Phoenix in an upcoming meeting of this council. So we will we'll send a mass email, but we'll also send a direct email out to each of the GUAC members with a link to that draft, and we'd be happy to provide a hard copy of that draft to each of you if that's what you would prefer upon request. We would ask that you review that draft and be prepared to discuss and make recommendations on that draft at the next meeting of the council. I know there are often a lot of questions or maybe more detailed comments on those types of drafts because they can be very extensive documents. So if that's the case, I would be happy to meet individually with the council members between now and then to make sure that we're discussing any of those questions and working through any of those comments. Actually, Vice Chair Fairbanks walked through some comments on the 4th management plans with me, and I very much appreciated that. So we're happy to do that again. Next slide, please. So after that next round of GUAC meetings where we would get that recommendation from the GUAC, we would start a promulgation process for each AMA. So the promulgation process is the legal adoption process for the management plans. So our intent is we'll publish that initial draft in January, take informal comments and also the recommendation from the GUAC and incorporate that feedback as appropriate. And then we would publish an updated draft with the notice of hearing to start this promulgation process. That notice of hearing opens a formal comment period, which goes from the date of the notice until 5 p.m. on the date of the hearing. And anyone can submit written comments during that time period, or they can attend the hearing and provide verbal comments at that time. Within 30 days of the hearing, ADWR issues findings addressing the comments that are received during that formal comment period. And at that time, ADWR may elect to adopt the plan as is or with modifications, or we may elect to go back for rehearing or review. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, I got ahead of myself. Within 30 days of if you could go back one, sorry. Within 30 days of ADWR issuing that order of adoption, we also are required to send notices to all of the rights holders, all of the regulated parties in that AMA. And per the statutes, it is only after that noticing step, it has to be at least 2 years past that noticing step, that the conservation requirements in the plans can become effective. So under that timeline of adopting all of those plans by the end of next year, those conservation programs, again, would become effective on January 1st, 2025. So now you can go to the next slide. Thank you. Again, I have some links and my contact information here on this final slide. We appreciate your participation throughout this process. We know that it's been intense. So with that, I'd like to thank you for your time, and I would gladly take any questions.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Questions or comments from the committee?
Natalie, this is Rory Van Pocky. Great work on what you've been working on with this. And then I would like to get together with you and discuss these fifth management plans with you in more detail after we get them and we read through them. That would be very helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Rory.
Frank, I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead, yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Natalie, for the presentation. Can you go back a couple of slides? Right there. So, right there. So, the draft will be published in January. How much time will people have to make comments on the draft? Is there a deadline for that?
That's a great question. Thank you. We don't have a hard deadline established right now for those comments, but we will provide that information when we send that email out. We typically try to provide about a month because it is a pretty lengthy document. So we'll do our best to provide a sufficient amount of time. Sure.
Okay. Is there a reason why we have to do this at the with respect to the council comments and recommendations? Is there a reason why it has to be in February?
Sure. So it's a good question, and I understand that it's aggressive timing. Doing that in the February meeting allows us to start that promulgation process. What you saw on the subsequent slide is that promulgation process is pretty extensive and does have several statutory timelines associated with it. So in order for us to be able to go through that process for all 5 AMAs, we are seeking those recommendations from all of the councils at the beginning of the year so that we can get right into that promulgation process for each of the AMAs.
Okay, well, I was thinking that it might be helpful for the council to have seen some of the comments that are made by others, by the regulated community, and to weigh in on some of those comments. It could be helpful for the department relative to the council's view of those issues, and how important they are. And that's the reason why I'm sort of asking the question about why February and maybe why not March if we get to see the comments that are done. Let's say you promulgate it on January 1st or maybe the 2nd or whatever, early January, and you ask for comments in by the early February, then perhaps the council could look at those comments and be prepared to talk about them maybe at a March meeting or something. I don't know if that's helpful, Frank and the rest of the council members. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It's just
Dave,
a thought
if
that I put out there. Yes.
I apologize for interrupting. So we have gotten comments from stakeholders throughout the development of the fifth management plans. I just wanted to note that many of those stakeholder comments, if we received them in writing or through one of our meeting questionnaires, those are all posted online on our concepts page that I mentioned. The other piece of that is that many of the comments that we received during kind of that initial draft review period tend to be a little more technical in nature, wordsmithing, grammar, that type of thing. I will certainly receive comments during that time period on the conservation programs, but typically it's smaller items, more of those detailed items rather than the big conceptual pieces of feedback that we did receive throughout the development process. So I think that's an important thing to note here.
Okay, well, I've had experience in this, if you might know, and it didn't always go that way. I can tell you in the second management plan and the third management plan, where we ended up with a very bad situation. I don't know that it'll happen this time because I think you have done a lot of outreach. I think that's been good. So I just throw that out there. I mean, it may not be that significant, but I toss it out there. So just something to consider. I have a couple of other things. Do these conservation requirements also apply to people who have permits from the department? So industrial use permits or other types of permits, are they subject to these conservation requirements?
Yes, so there is a conservation program for each sector, ag, muni, industrial. There are general industrial requirements, specific subsector requirements, kind of depending on the details of the use. But yes, in general, the conservation requirements do apply kind of across the board for groundwater users.
So anybody that's pumping groundwater.
Right.
Okay. And my one last question, sorry for all these questions. Recently, the department held a meeting to talk about incentives for the recovery of water in areas with shallow water tables. And I know that there was some feedback. Can you give us a status of the deliberations internally and to the extent you've had any externally on what is happening with that? Because that could be one area where you might get some feedback if it hasn't been fully vetted with everybody and there's some consensus about how to approach that.
Yes, that's a great point, and I apologize that I did not mention that earlier. We are still working through some of those kind of open questions internally. What our intent would be is to either publish some kind of a finalized proposal in writing on that concepts page, or if needed, we would have another public meeting to kind of fully discuss those things. I don't have a more detailed update or a timeline on that at this point. We're working through some of those issues, but hopefully I'll have more of an update soon on that.
Okay, but your intent is try to reach some consensus with the regulated community about that before it shows up in the draft plan.
Right.
Okay.
The draft would not be the next time you see that. There would
Okay,
be some additional communication in the meantime.
Okay, just want to make sure. Thank you. All right, I'm finished there, Frank. Sorry for all the questions.
No problem at all. Let's get them all out. Any more, Stephen, anything you'd like to say at this stage?
Yeah, Mr. Vice Chair, Dave had a great comment as usual. I think it was his first one about how quick between January and February, because your reasoning, Dave, was spot on. The rest of the community to hear what some of the comments and feedback. I heard Jenna's response to that, but I think that's going to be critical because that's been one of the accusations leveled. Sometimes not enough time for the greater community to discuss back and forth some of these proposals and concepts. So I hope that that's taken to heart, that that's going to be critical. In January and February, that's an interesting time of year. Sometimes it's hard to get some things started and rolling, but we've been forewarned. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bale. If I could just add to that, the time frame between January and February there is really intended for informal comments too. So there is an additional formal comment period as a part of that legal adoption process that I laid out as well. So I guess my point there would be that January to February time period won't be the last opportunity for comments there.
Okay.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Okay. Natalie, I just want to make sure I've got this all straight, and you can. I probably messed some of it up. So the draft we are going to get that you want each of us to comment on is the January draft. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Is there going to be another draft before that you want us to comment on?
So prior to that, what you could review is that concepts page, which lays out some of the details of the updated conservation programs that you'll see when we publish that initial draft in January. So there is some draft regulatory language on there laying out kind of the way we'll structure the legal language and that type of thing for those updated conservation programs. So a lot of that is available. It's just not available in its final all the chapters form for each AMA until January.
So you are looking to each of us to comment on the concept page, or is that simply an option for us?
You have both options.
Okay. So the concepts page is available now?
Yes.
Or soon? Now?
Yes.
And then in January, we're going to get the official document.
That's correct, yes.
The official draft.
Right.
Okay. Now, we've been in this process for what, a year, 9 months, a year and a half? How long have we been working this process? With the community, with community meetings and whatnot?
We had our first management plans work group meeting in July of 2019, so it's been over 2 years now.
And I presume that pretty much all of the ideas have come to light in these meetings. Now, all of the ideas may not show up in the drafts, but have pretty much all of the ideas that might be considered been talked about in these meetings?
Yes. So what you'll see on the concepts page is all of those ideas. Anything that we discussed as kind of a solid proposal is on that page, whether we decided to go forward with it or not. So there are actually several concepts on that page that we opted to not move forward with, and that's noted with those concepts.
So the whole spectrum of what's being considered is in the concept page, but some of those may not find their way to the draft.
Yes, that's correct, and it's noted in the title of that particular item.
And I think you've had a number of meetings with the different communities, because I know from past plans, there's a section that involves the city and the cities, and there's a section on industries, and there's section in ag, but you've had meetings with all of these different groups, right?
Yes, that's correct. We had a subgroup under that management plans work group for each of the sectors, ag, muni, and industrial, and also a breakout group specific to turf.
So what you decide to include to propose in the draft, it might be a surprise to some people in that they thought maybe it'd be dropped, or maybe they think there ought to be more regulation. But there shouldn't be any significant items that people have never heard of.
No, we worked really hard to make sure that there's not surprises in there. It's what we'll be including in the legal language and what we've included in the draft legal language on the website. We worked pretty hard to make sure that it was faithful to the conversations that we had in those public work group meetings.
So if we go and look at the comments today, we would essentially be seeing comments about these different ideas that were considered, some of which won't make it to the draft.
In some cases, yes, but many of them are also comments on the concepts that were agreed upon that we will be moving forward with.
That's right. Okay. Now, last question for me. When we do go to the comments on the draft in January, are our comments public record in that case?
So anything that is submitted to the document or to the department is public record. I don't remember if we posted, I think we did post GUAC member comments on our website with the fourth management plans, and that's typically our practice. When we receive comments in writing, we do typically post those to our website as kind of an addition or an appendix to the management plan, kind of in the interest of transparency.
Yes, I thought that was the case, but I wanted to make sure for the committee members knew that they were aware that their comments would be posted in the process. Well, with that, I don't have any further questions. If there's no more, are there any additional comments or questions from the committee? Thank you very much, Natalie. It has been a tremendous process you've gone through, and you know, the law really requires a little bit of tightening up each time, and nobody much likes that. We'd all like less I know I'd like less regulation, not more. But there is a need to continue moving. But I really appreciate the openness of the process and the fact that the process has given the stakeholders so much opportunity to comment which alternatives are less damaging, which alternatives are more acceptable, and had an opportunity to really hear things out so there are no big surprises at the end. So thank you very much for your process.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Okay, the next item is call to the council. Is there anything the council would like to raise either for future agendas or future discussions we'd like to have? We should note that we've asked that next year on the fees that we're hoping to have a two-step process. It sounds as if the staff has concurred with that. Is there anything else the committee would like to raise in terms of future agenda items or other issues?
Frank, I have a request for the department.
Go ahead.
This goes back to our discussion earlier about the recovery fee, and I'm interested in finding out how much money the department has collected from recovery fees, let's say over the last 3 to 5 years each year within the Phoenix area. Just to better understand what that revenue is to the department and how those monies are used. I think it might be helpful for us in future deliberations potentially. So it might also be good to better understand the statutory limitations on that the recovery fee as well, if there is one.
That's a good
Okay.
point, Dave.
Go ahead.
This is Roy. That's a good point, Dave. I think. What is the statute of limitations there? I never thought of that. So that'd be good to know.
Anyone else? Ideas, suggestion, requests?
I would, Frank, I'd like to just compliment Natalie Mast and the entire ADWR team. I think they've been really holding good meetings, listening to the, from my standpoint, the stakeholders, and have done a really great job with a very tight time frame. I think they've gone above and beyond. So I want to compliment them and thank them.
Include my thanks, because I know it's a tough process, and haven't you been doing it virtually statewide with all the AMAs simultaneously, which must be complicated. So great work. Thank you.
Frank,
Yes.
Frank, I'd like to piggyback on that too. Those good comments on the work on the Fifth Management Committee. Also, Frank, I wanted to comment on something from our meeting in September of last year. I think you'll remember you had a request of staff, and the best I had in my notes, it said that Frank Fairbanks asked for staff for a memo briefing GUAC members before any items requiring a vote, especially a type of fact sheet, you said, and especially before items requiring a vote, it involved grant requests. And I think I'm hearing that, I don't know if you recall that common theme today, asking for a little more information here and there, but that's what I had my notes from a year ago. And I didn't know if you're receiving that information. I'm not receiving any such fact sheet myself, but I do think it would be a good idea.
So I did make that request. As best of my knowledge, I'm receiving the same thing the rest of you are. So there's no inside information that I'm getting. But a request from any of us needs to be responded to by the department. And I think it is healthy when we're asked to make a decision to have some of the facts in front of us. So I still think that's a good idea. And it should be on somebody's to-do list to respond to that at some point.
I agree.
Sure.
That's why I brought it up.
It would help us. We get the agenda, and we generally, or at least I, don't always, some of these things I know we've done them in the past, but you don't always understand what the issue that's going to be presented. And if we had like even a one pager that set out the basic concept of what's going to be discussed, then it'd be easier to be prepared. I still think that, but I don't know that we can create work for you all on staff. I think staff needs to respond to that and tell us whether that's doable or not. I think under the public records law, if we got such a piece of paper, then that piece of paper would have to be available to the general public as well. Under my understanding of the public records law, they can't give us something that the public does not get. But I think responding to this request is something that staff needs to do. I hope they can do it. But I don't know that we have the power to order it. It would be very useful.
Sure, and we've definitely increased the information that we give out prior to meetings, whether that's documents or the slides. I know in the past we've given out just agendas, so we have increased some of that, but we can take it a step further and provide a little bit of documentation for each action item moving forward.
From my perspective, and Stephen can comment on this also, what would be useful is just even a few paragraphs saying what the issue is about, or what the options might be, or just so that we come in with an idea of what it is we're going to be discussing. Stephen, anything you'd add to that?
Well, I think you're spot on in wrapping up my first year here, and in the pandemic, It's brought challenges. Yes, I can see you all. You look like teensy tiny little people, even with my glasses on. I couldn't pick out any of you on the street. I couldn't greet you. I don't know you. I haven't met you yet, really. And all the things we do in a normal committee meeting situation, boards, we're all on them, serve on them, help with them. And the knowledge you pick up from hanging around before the meeting, after meeting, the breaks, and then the ensuing often friendships and camaraderie that comes from that. I guess it was driven home to me how important that is. I'm a farmer, but I still have somewhat of a career being on boards and different things, all volunteer, by the way, never paid. But what we missed out during the pandemic and not getting to meet with you guys and my fellow committeemen. And I found myself kind of drawn up short on some of these meetings. No fault of anybody's, obviously. I don't want to read reams of data, staff, quite frankly, but maybe a short, like what the vice chair was saying, a short explanation of some of these things that are coming up. You know, you guys are very fond of acronyms, and it takes a while to learn some of these alphabet soup of names on my own. But I think you hear the point. Thank you for the time.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, there's also a call to the public. If anybody's on the line and wish to comment about any of the topics we've discussed today, we would be glad to take a comment.
Vice Chair Fairbanks,
yes.
this is Brett Fleck
Yes.
from the city of Peoria. Is it now an appropriate time?
Yes, go right ahead, Brett.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'd like to go back and make a comment about the water loss audit training and technical assistance program from one of the members that was able to participate and benefit from that. So I want to start off by thanking the GUAC for investing in this initiative. The city of Peoria wouldn't have been able to come up with the funding to hire a training and technical assistant consultant on our own. So we really benefited by the support from the department. For my position with the city, I can say unequivocally this investment was worthwhile and will continue to pay dividends for the city into the future. I'd like to give my kudos to the consultant, Southwest Environmental Finance Center. The success of the program that you heard about today was largely due to their efforts and expertise. But I'd also like to give my kudos, like Patrick Adams did, to ADWR's Carol Ward for her many years of advocacy on the topic of water loss. I think that many of us are now just catching up to the things that she's known and talked about for years. So a lot of appreciation there. At its heart, water loss audits are really about measuring and validating measurements of water use through a host of best management practices. Well, Peoria has found that by industry standards, we're generally a well-run utility, which is nice. The training and technical assistance program helped grow a culture of measurement, validation, and importantly, iteration. And this culture or mindset, which is guided by national industry standards, helps to increase the quality of our data, which in turn then spurs ideas and opens doors for future analysis and investment in our infrastructure and operations that will absolutely increase our water use efficiency going forward. My last comment here is that while the scale of the training may be out of reach for all Arizona utilities, depending on their sizes, I would like to recommend that the state explore some sort of training opportunity or requirement to ensure that at least one representative from each utility, each regulated utility, is exposed to these concepts as a very first step, because being exposed to the ideas, the methods, rationale, and potential of the program were really game changers for the city, and something that going into it we had hopes for and came out just blown away by how much we benefited, like I said, from culture, understanding, and building plans to improve our operations going forward. So huge kudos to you all for funding that. I think it was a great decision.
Brett, those are tremendous comments, and that's just what needs to happen. And I think David talked about extending it throughout the state. That's a tremendous idea, and it needs to happen somehow. But it's good to see the progress. And the reality is, it helps our water situation, because each leak that doesn't happen, or each water loss that doesn't occur, means that that water supplier, whether it's a city or a private company, doesn't matter, makes that much less demand on either the groundwater or SRP or CAWCD. So it really is a way to conserve and reduce how much water is actually used. So great comments and very well done. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Other comments from the folks online?
We have one more comment from the room here from Carol Ward.
Okay.
All right, good afternoon, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the council. I just wanted to say in follow-up also to the Technical Assistance Program presentation, as Brett said, that program would never have happened without the $250,000 in Water Management Assistance Programs funds that were provided by the department on the recommendation of the GUAC. Mr. Roberts asked why this program was specific to the AMWA cities, and I just wanted to follow up on that as well. As Patrick mentioned, AMWA staff and the cities proposed and committed to do the work to undertake a pilot of large providers, which the state had not previously done. The two prior pilots the state had implemented were with small and medium-sized utilities, and those were more basic trainings. This particular program expanded on what was accomplished in those two pilots. It was intended to demonstrate the potential for more advanced water loss control practices, addressing water loss control phases 2 and 3, which is the technical and economic analyses that lead to recommendations for how to cost-effectively target interventions that address real losses, and ensuring that the utilities are continuing to reach for greater efficiency and water management. I wanted to say thank you to the AMWA Board of Directors, the Management Board, and the staff of AMWA, the expert and dedicated team at EFC, and most especially the leadership and staff at the AMWA cities. This program required a significant commitment on their part and a tremendous investment of time and effort from all of the staff that were involved. And the program and the outcome was all that I had hoped for and then some. This program reinforces Arizona's place among the leading states in the country on water loss control efforts. And the department looks forward to working with AMWA, water agencies, and water providers to consider the next steps in how the state can continue to support the efforts of all Arizona providers in addressing distribution system water loss. Water efficiency and conservation of the supplies that we already have, as the Vice Chair mentioned, is the quickest and most cost-effective means to increase water availability. And in light of Colorado River shortage and increasing pressures on limited water supplies, distribution system water loss control, and all of our demand-side efforts will continue to be critical to the state's resiliency. So my thanks to this council for all of your ongoing support on this project and through all the years.
Thank you very much for those excellent comments.
Thank you, Carol.
Thank you, Carol.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And you know, the providers that were involved in that, I don't have the number in front of me, but I would guess that they represent over 95%, or they supply water to 95% of the people living in the AMA, which this committee is responsible for supporting and working with. So although they're not the smallest providers, they are the providers that are providing water to most people, and they're also ones that are drawing the most water from the system. Any further comments from the public? Last call for comments from the public. Hearing none, unless there's an objection, I will be adjourning the meeting. Any objections? Anything we needed to talk about we didn't? Hearing no objection, the meeting is adjourned at 3:28 p.m. Thank you very much, all of you, for your participation.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Frank.
Frank.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Frank.
everybody.
Thank you, staff.
Thank you, staff,
Thank you, staff.
AWR.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.